The residents of the small town of Acme in northern Washington state were shocked by a murder that took place in the fall of 1989. The crime remained unsolved for 30 years, until a chance meeting between two women in 2013 led to the arrest of the killer, whom no one had suspected. In November 1989, 18-year-old Mandy Stavik returned home to celebrate Thanksgiving with her family. After starting college at Central Washington University, she fully immersed herself in student life, making new friends, joining the track team, and participating in various extracurricular activities. After 3 months of intense studying, Mandy missed her family, her mother, brother, and sisters. In 1988, their family had moved to the small town of Acme, where only 240 people lived, and Mandy eagerly awaited the chance to visit and enjoy the beauty of the surrounding hills, forests, and lakes. Since childhood, Mandy had been a runner, specializing in short distances but also performing well in long-distance races. Upon arriving in Acme, she found a 3-kilometer forest trail and started running there daily. On November 24th, a Friday, Mandy took the family dog, a German Shepherd named Kira, for another run. The last people to see the student near her home were the Stavik neighbors around 2:30 p.m. Typically, Mandy didn't stay outside for more than 20 minutes, so when she was not back at 2:50 p.m. and Kira returned home without her at 3 p.m., her parents immediately became concerned and contacted the police. The terrain of the Acme district, where the town of Acme is located, is a complex landscape with hills, forests, and water bodies, which made the search efforts slow. It was only on November 27, 3 days after Mandy's disappearance, that the police managed to find her body on the banks of the Nooksack River. Detective Ron Peterson, who led the search operation, still remembers that moment. "I saw something white among the bushes and hoped that it might not be what I was thinking. Unfortunately, it turned out to be Mandy. She was lying on her back, almost naked, except for her sneakers and socks," Peterson recalled later in an interview. According to the forensic report, the girl was forced into proximity by the perpetrator, who then took her life. Investigating the evidence, the police were able to reconstruct the chronological events. Apparently, the attacker had a car, traces of which were found near the scene of the crime. Under the threat of a weapon, he made Mandy sit in his car and drove her to the river. The police speculated that the girl tried to escape from the perpetrator, as evidenced by scratches from thorny bushes on her hands and feet. However, the perpetrator caught up to her and finished what he had started. Authorities hoped for DNA left at the crime scene by the killer, but searches in the National DNA Database did not lead to any matches, and hopes for a swift resolution of the case faded away. After that, the police questioned the residents of Acme about any suspicious vehicles that may have been seen in the town or along Mandy's route that day. Unfortunately, none of those questioned provided any useful information. The death of Mandy shocked the small town, where there hadn't been any murders for over 20 years. Almost all of the residents of Acme attended the student's funeral. Even years later, when the police still hadn't found the killer, people still remembered the 18-year-old girl, whose life was cut short in such a horrific way. In June 2013, Heather Backstrom and Mary Anderson, not knowing each other well, went to the water park with their children. They had gone to school with Mandy and began discussing the unsolved crime that had happened many years ago. Both women had been following the investigation, reading all the articles, and knew the suspects. Backstrom and Anderson discussed their suspicions about the criminal. Heather considered Tim Bass a possible culprit, and Mary was surprised to find that they both agreed. Tim had been a neighbor of Mandy in the past and showed persistent and rude interest in both women, which raised their suspicions. At the time of Mandy's death, Tim was 22 years old and lived next to the Stavik family. These aspects raised suspicions for Heather and Mary regarding Tim's possible involvement in the murder. Mary Anderson recounts feeling a chill when she was around Tim, and couldn't explain why she was afraid of him. The women at the time didn't feel it was enough to accuse Tim of the crime, but always sensed hidden aggression from him. They decided to contact the police so detectives could investigate the murder and pay attention to Tim. In 2013, Tim Bass was married with 3 children. He worked as a delivery driver in a bakery and was considered a decent member of society. Denying the accusations, Tim claimed he didn't know Mandy, despite being neighbors and their families becoming friends immediately after moving in. He refused to give his DNA sample, citing an alibi provided by his future wife, saying he had gone home for lunch during the murder. Detectives weren't persistent and didn't conduct a thorough investigation, not getting necessary information from Tim's employer. If Heather and Mary hadn't intervened, the case would most likely have remained unsolved. These women had repeatedly contacted the police to remind the detectives about the need for investigation. The women felt a moral responsibility and were determined to restore justice, even if others were indifferent to the case. They couldn't forget about Mandy and insisted on continuing the investigation. In 2017, young detective Kim Dorse took Tim's DNA for comparison with the suspect's sample. Kim had been monitoring Tim for about 3 months to collect samples of his DNA. In the end, a soda can and a cup thrown away by Tim were found and compared to the suspect's sample. Kim Dorse was excited, waiting for the results of the DNA comparison, as it had taken a lot of time and effort. When the results turned out to be positive, he felt an incredible joy, as it definitively linked him to the crime. Tim was arrested on December 12, 2017, on suspicion of Mandy's murder. His lawyer Bass built his defense on the idea of secret relations between the accused and the victim. However, at the time of Mandy's death, she was already dating another man, and there was no evidence of problems in their relationship. Interestingly, during the trial, Bass's entire family turned away from him. Tim's brother remembered him asking for an alibi on the day of Mandy's disappearance, and the accused wife changed her statements about them having lunch together on November 24, saying she did so out of fear of her husband. I want to underline that I am completely innocent of this crime. I wish no harm to anyone even today. I am sorry that they want to put me in prison for something I didn't do, Tim stated in court before the verdict was announced. Tim was found guilty of murder and sentenced to 27 years in prison on May 24, 2019. His ex-wife, who filed for divorce immediately after the accusation, claimed that he enjoyed watching crime documentaries and boasted that he would never make such a mistake. Bass expressed the opinion that he would never be caught because he was much smarter. If it weren't for the persistence of 2 housewives who trusted their intuition, Tim would likely still be free, as he claimed.